7 out of 10 divorces in the United States today are initiated by women. 70% of them.
Mitchell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, brother. It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you, man.
Absolutely. My first and most important question is, how are you doing? Like, for real, Mitchell, how are you doing?
For real, Mitchell, how you doing? That's a good question. And you know what? Actually, no one's really asked me that because most of the time I'm the guy asking that question.
That's right.
But yeah, man, it's been a tough season. My boy is teething right now, which you're going to find all about that in a few months. But been real challenging. My dog's been sick every day, and he's been like puking up everywhere, and there's just stuff going wrong in the house. And you know, like I mentioned before we hit record, like the Instagram got hacked, and you know, it's just like it's been a bit of a whirlwind, if I'm honest, man. But been really having to practice what I preach with my clients and on the podcast in order to really kind of keep my head on straight, man, because as they say, when it rains, it pours. But, you know, overall, I'm doing well, keeping my eyes on the bigger picture, you know, but it's been a bit of a grind, man, the past couple of weeks, I would say.
Yeah. Do you handle challenges and obstacles better now than, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago? Or have you always been a person who can handle things like that? You don't get too frazzled, or are you better at them now in this sort of stage of your life?
I would say I'm better at handling it now. Before 4 to 5 years ago, I'd let so many other things slip. So what I do, man, is I clamp down, right? And I grab control and I get super rigid. And so what I tend to do is hyper focus on the thing that needs fixing. And then the rest of my life torpedoes. You know, I stop working out, or I stop paying attention to my wife, or whatever. Now, I think I still have that tendency to get kind of intense with fixing the thing, but I'm better at I would say balance. I don't really love that word, but I do better at maintaining the other parts of my life in the midst of adversity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel the same way as you. You know, I'm Mitchell. I come from an athletic background, and so if you want to be great at anything, as you know, right, you have to sort of have that singular obsessive pursuit. And that's a good thing until it's not, right? A lot of people find that out when they reach the top of the mountain and they're looking around. They're like, fuck, I got nobody to share this shit with. Like, this kind of sucks. And so I think now the sports world has done a good job now of saying, yeah, we want to have that singular focus when we're doing the thing. But when we're not doing the thing, let's have a singular focus on building our relationships or getting the appropriate rest. And so I think what you're saying, I don't like the word balance either. I think it more of like trying to have some harmony in my life.
Yeah.
But I think like you coach high performers, right? High performers are fucking driven, bro. And when they come to a coach, they're like, if I start to change my mindset, am I going to lose my edge? And I'm sure you're like, no. We're going to refigure that edge, and it's just going to be better for you because you're going to have more energy. You're going to feel better. You're actually going to maybe get to the top of the mountain and have someone to celebrate with, like, fucking dude, we're proud of you. You did something really cool. And that's sort of the vibe that I feel like we need to be on. But I think most people are missing that first part of like maybe being obsessive about one thing first and then sort of bringing it back. I think it's much harder to sort of force someone to go and do the work rather than they're already doing the work. Let's bring them back slightly and reconfigure some things in their life so they can do this over a long period of time. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, man. I mean, I look at it like there's people that, you know, like when you're walking a dog, there's dogs that pull you on the leash and there's dogs that you have to drag. You know what I mean? And we're the same thing, man. There's people that you got to like pull by a leash to get them to do something. And there are people who you're like, whoa, slow down. Like, let's just pump the brakes a little bit and let's get some moderation in your life and really not lose focus on some of the things that matter the most, you know, because we can talk professional success all day, but if your personal life is a mess, then that's some big conversations that we need to have, you know. So I agree 100%, man. There's definitely two camps, and I think the best, the people who really figure it out, the successful high performers or the career-driven individuals are the people who understand how to live in that tension and in that focus of doing the best to see success in all those areas, both professionally and personally, right? And that's really all that I talk about is is, helping high performing men reclaim their home, their health, and happiness without sacrificing their career success, right? And that takes intentionality for sure.
Yes, a ton of attentionality. And yeah, it's so very interesting. Especially, I mean, I'm sure you think about this a lot, but I think about sort of the idea of the modern masculine man and what that means. I told you I'm having a son, so I've been thinking about it even more. Like, what values do I represent? Do I stand by those things? Are my words lining up with my actions? Do I treat my wife with love and respect? Will I do that when things get hard and my son is crying in the middle of the night? Can I still stand up on my values? All those sorts of things. So when you're working with, let's say, maybe a high performing dad, what are the most common issues that you see, to sort of generalize it? Because I know it's individual for each person, but maybe as a general scope, what are you looking at most often?
It's a fantastic starting point. And I would say beyond a shadow of a doubt, the biggest complaint or the biggest challenge is this. I've spent all this time building this business or, working in this high level leadership position. And then I come home and I feel powerful at work, but I'm powerless at home. I can lead board meetings. I can lead, committees. I can do whatever, but I don't know how to talk to my own wife anymore. And so professional success, personal mess, right? And so what happens is men, and I talk a lot to, I'll use the framework a lot with men because that's who I work with, but men are fixers, and men, especially in this position of whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in a position of leadership, it's literally your job to fix things and to fix them well. And that's why you get paid. And so what happens is you get really good at that. And then so you do that maybe 8-10 hours a day. And then you come home and then all of a sudden you got to flip a switch. And now it's no longer your job to fix anything. Now it's no longer your job. And now it's like, well, wait a minute. What do I do? My wife doesn't need me to fix anything. In fact, she doesn't want me to fix it. My kids don't want me to fix it. But what do I do now? And they don't necessarily understand what it looks like to be successful in the home, because let's think about it. When you, as a man, like some of the drivers of masculinity are like excellence, having a strong sense of mission, purpose, success, being assertive, all those different things. And so it's really easy to quantify success in the workplace because you get bonuses, you get higher revenue in the next quarter, you get whatever, you get contracts, you name it. But when you come home, how do you quantify if you're successful? I mean, your 6-year-old son's not going to come up to you and be like, hey, daddy, here are 5 strategic reasons why you've increased in your fatherhood over the last 3 quarters. It's not gonna
imagine that, Mitchell. Imagine that. That'd be hilarious.
Right?
Anyways, sorry, derailed that with laughter. But anyways, go ahead. That's hilarious.
No, but it's just the way it is, right? How do you measure that you've made progress in your emotional intelligence? I mean, it's also intangible. And so number one, we don't know how to quantify when we're being successful. And if we're driven and paid by our ability to be successful, to fix things, to improve, to strategize, then it all goes out the window when we get home. Right? And then the second big thing is because we don't necessarily understand that dynamic shift, we come home and we start treating our spouses like employees. We start treating our kids like board members or colleagues, right? And so I'll tell you a quick story about one of my clients. I had this conversation with him about a month ago, and I just thought it was so interesting. We were talking and he was having a hard time in his marriage. And he said, man, I just don't understand. I come home and she's pissed off. The kids are screaming. And I keep telling her, this is what you got to do. This is the strategy. Do this and do this. And she just gets even more mad. And that makes me mad. And I stopped. I was like, whoa, hold on a second. I'm like, okay, how many men do you lead in your company? He's like, I got a crew of about 80 guys. So, okay, you got 80 guys. You got your wife and the 3 kids at home. I said, how many of those 80 guys are you having sex with? And he was like, none, obviously. So I'm like, okay, so if you have an entirely different relationship with your wife and your children than all these men, then why are you treating her the same way? The relationship is totally different. And so these guys, you're You're their CEO. You're their boss. This woman, you're her groom, her husband, her, the person who's supposed to protect her, provide for her, preside with her, all those different things. And so the same rules do not apply. And as long as you continue treating your family like employees or not with the intimacy and the intentionality that is required, then you're going to keep failing at home, right? And so understand how to make that switch. And that's where so many men struggle, in my experience.
So then I mean, just building off that, how would they make that switch? Like, what's I think about like um, sports, for example, right? A lot of it is coming down to getting into the present moment and taking a deep breath, right? What's important now is what I teach my players, using that centering deep breath. Okay, this is what I need to do. This is most important, this pitch in front of me. And I'm not sure who shared this, but it's an advice for fathers. Like when they get back into the driveway and they're in their car, why not take a few deep breaths for 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds? Understand what you're letting go and what you need to do when you get home so that when you walk in the door and you step on Legos, you don't immediately blow up, right? You know who you're supposed to be when you get into that car. I like to break my life up into energy, work, and love. And energy being sort of the most important, because if I don't have any energy, then, well, I can't do anything. And then I break it up into work. Okay, I'm done with work. How can I now get into deep love? Well, I'm going to get into deep love by just taking this centering breath, or maybe a few in the car, or maybe listening to something that's going to get me into dad mode. So then I walk into the house, I can make that sort of switch. I've been thinking about that a lot, obviously, as my kid is on the way. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a brilliant tactical step. I call it the preparation pause. So take 5 minutes before you go into the house. Very similar. Wrap up any, because we know that all these open loops, it's called the Zeigarnik effect. I don't know if you've ever heard about it before, but it's been studied where when, and the psychologist, their last name was Zeigarnik. And so essentially what they realized was that servers were really good at remembering orders as long as the order wasn't fulfilled. When someone would put in an order, they could remember it all. But the second they cashed out, they forgot what the person ordered, right? The loop closed. And so what that tells us about the mind is if we have loops that are open, like texts that are unanswered, emails that are unsent, conversations that aren't wrapped up, they stay in our mind and they rattle around and they just add to our mental load, right? And so one of the things that you do in that 5 minutes is to simply wrap up any conversations that you have, shoot off any emails, whatever. That's the first step, right? Close all the open loops so that your mind there's nothing else going on in your mind that's rattling around, so you can be present and focused with your partner and your children, right? Second thing is, like I said, practicing your breathing, whether it's box breathing, the 4-7-8 breathing, whatever your thing is, but take time to regulate your emotions to get into a place of peace and calm. And then what I call externalizing. And this is asking yourself, what does a great husband, how does he show up when he opens that door? What does a great father do when he opens the door, right? Because the thing is you have no idea what's going to be on the other side of that door when you open it. And as a man, as a husband, as a father, I want your listeners to hear me say this. It's your responsibility to be the lowest heart rate in the room. Mm-hmm. All right. Emotionally, as men, especially, when we talk about masculinity, it's our responsibility to be the calm in the room, that we ought to be thermostats, not thermometers. We don't, like thermometers are constantly reacting to everything else. So when you open the door and your wife is freaking out and the kids are screaming and you come in and you're like, I had a shit day, whatever. I don't deserve this. What's going on here? And you start blaming it. You're a thermometer, right? But we want to be a thermostat. We want to set the tone. And realistically, we need to understand that as men in this situation and in our relationships as fathers, there is a certain emotional weight that we carry in the home. And that's a good thing. But because of that, we have to be aware of it and be low. Our presence needs to be a soothing balm to our home. Does that make sense? And so asking yourself in that moment, after regulating yourself, breathing, asking yourself, what would a great father do? Would he walk through the door and keep texting and keep emailing, or would he put the phone away and sit down with his kids? Mm. What would a great father or husband do? Would he walk in and start complaining about the day, or would he hug his wife and kiss her and say how much he appreciates all that she's been doing today? You know what I mean? And so it's this reset before you walk into the house. So I would say that that's a real simple tactic that you could implement. I mean, there's a whole lot more than that, but it's interesting that you mentioned yours because it's in alignment with one of the things that I teach my guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so now the guy gets into the house and maybe he's lacking some sort of communication skills to better understand his wife. Where would he start from there? What does he need to understand about that woman that maybe he's not registering that's causing a potential disconnect from her and from him and things of that nature?
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I mean, we talk about this all the time in marriage, and I think it's pretty commonly known that it's not your responsibility to, or it's not your duty to fix your wife's problems. It's she just wants you to listen, she wants to feel heard, right? And so we know that I teach this all the time that women have three basic needs: to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel safe. Okay? So when we talk about feeling seen, we can break that into the 3 A's, which is appreciation, acknowledgement, and affection, right? And so that's how to make her feel seen. To make her feel heard is how to actively listen and to be focused and to be present, to putting the phone down, and to feel safe. It's so much more than just physical safety, but we talk about emotional safety. Like, is she comfortable sharing what's on her heart and on her mind? And is she comfortable to share that, knowing that you're not going to belittle her or try to fix it or try to give her some 10-step strategy and whatever, emotionally, right? And obviously physically, but relationally, does she know that you're not going to walk out, or that you're not going to be looking at porn, or you're not going to be stepping out on her? Is she fully confident that she's relationally safe with you? And then the last one is financially. Does she feel safe financially with you? Are you responsible with your resources so that she knows that her and the kids are safe and that you've been providing and that you're also protecting in that way? And so the reason why I articulate that, Aaron, is because so many guys, when we say protect, we think just physically, right? Also, like, does she feel safe with you physically? Not just that you're protecting her from like a burglar or something, but from you. Are you the kind of guy who's putting your fist through the wall, or you're throwing stuff, or you're breaking things? That doesn't make for a safe environment. And so what we need to understand is, if we want to show up powerfully for our partners, especially, our wives, we need to understand that we need to meet those three basic needs. And that's usually by connecting with them on an emotional level. And this is where we struggle as men, is to connect with our emotions. And there's a lot of reasons why we struggle with our emotions, and we could get into that. But at the end of the day, our wife is just looking for us to sit and empathize with her, to validate her emotions, to say, so instead, she said, the kids are screaming, I got a headache, all those different things. Instead of saying, hey, well, this is why this could be better, or this is what you can do to fix it, being like, man, that sucks. I'm really sorry you had such a tough day. You know what? If I were you, I'd feel the exact same way. I'd be pissed off too. And like, can you tell me more about that? You're asking, you're drawing out from her, and then she feels seen. She feels heard. She feels safe to continue talking. And then you sort of have that conversation, draw her out, so that she can feel connected with you on an emotional level. Hey, how can I support you in this? It's been a shitty day. I get it. What can I do right now to meet these needs? Can I take the kids? Whatever. If you want to go lay down for a little bit, maybe I can make dinner, take care of whatever the case is. But so many men just go to fix it, right? Mm-hmm. They just go. And one way I like to explain it is like when we show up and our wives or our partners are having a hard day and they're really upset about something and they don't necessarily want us to fix it. It feels like, especially as men, because we're super practical and tactical, it's like watching a house up in flames and you got a fire hose and it's fully charged and ready to go, but you can't turn it on. You just got to sit there and watch the house burn. That's literally how it feels sometimes. And so for us, it's a skill that we need to develop, to stop in the moment. And a really simple question you can ask your partner is, if you walk in and she's kind of unraveling like this, you can just say, hey, you know what, honey, just a quick question before we jump into this. Is this something where you just want me to listen? Or is this something that you want to help me fix? I'm happy to do either, but just want to understand how to meet your expectations, or just want to understand how to show up powerfully for you. Dude, you ask that question, she's just going to be like, oh, well, no, actually, I don't need you to fix anything. Well, the great thing then is the pressure's off.
Mhm.
I mean, it's easy. You'll be like, all right, shoot, fire away. But she might actually want help. And then she might say, you know what, actually, this time, I'd love your help. Okay, tell me, how can I help? So that clarity is amazing, because it stops you from like instantly shoving a solution down her throat, thinking you're helping. And then she gets upset because she's like, I don't want you to fix this. Why do you keep doing this? And then you get frustrated because all you're doing is trying to help. You don't want my help. I had a hard day too, blah, 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 and we know how it goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
also, I think if I'm hearing you right, ties into that safety piece. Because if
Yes.
I make my wife feel validated with what she's going through, eventually she's going to understand that, okay, I feel seen because of this. I'm safe in this place with you, sharing these details. Then I think it probably turns to, okay, what can we do about it? Like it's not always going to be, here are my problems. I want to never fix them. So you have to hear about the problems always and always and always and always and always again. But there's sort of a test going on there that you're actually going to listen without judging, without trying to fix, without trying to do anything about it. And then that validation is there, like you're talking about, with that seen and heard. And then that safety piece comes in. Then she's like, okay, Aaron, I do actually want to fix this problem now. Now that you've actually seen me in this, and you felt me, and you put yourself in my shoes. Okay, now we can use your sort of skills, sort of tactical brain, because you've been there in the trenches with me. Now let's get out of the trenches together and let's go fix the problem. At least in my experience with my own wife, like that's sort of the process that she wants. The initial stages, maybe it's 2 weeks of just listening to the same problem over and over and over again. You have to get really good at it. Like, God damn it, I want to fucking fix this shit. Like you said, the house is burning down. Like, what are we doing? But eventually, then that safety piece comes into play, which you express really eloquently. And then it's like, okay, now we can do something about it. At least that's how I've sort of materialized it.
And how you've materialized it is exactly how I teach it. And I would say this, when we talk about the masculine versus the feminine, I heard this explained a little while ago, and I love it. The feminine is all about being. The masculine is all about doing. You understand what I mean? And so that's why a woman can sit in this posture and feel these emotions and be there and just, this is how I am, this is how I feel, versus a man is all about doing, about executing. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm pissed off, but what am I doing about it, right? And so even just in our essence, in our nature, we just approach adversity so differently, right?
Mm.
And so you have to understand that David Data said this in his book, The Way of the Superior Man. He said, the feminine will always perplex the masculine, right? There will never come a time where you completely understand your wife. And that's actually by design, right? It's fine because she's feminine and you're not wired that way. You have different ways of looking at life. And so understanding that and saying, okay, I don't need to figure this out. It doesn't need to make sense to me. In fact, it's not my responsibility to make sense of anything. It's my responsibility to hold space and to sit with her and ask questions like, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or to empathize and say, that really sucks. I'm really sorry you're going through that. Full stop, without a strategy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can
Yeah.
you dig deeper for me on the 3 A's that you mentioned? Can we go deeper into that a little bit?
Yeah, man, for sure. So appreciation, man, is huge because here's the thing. We so often think things, but we don't say them. And one of the sayings in my house is, if you think it, say it, in a positive way, right? If you think, man, this dinner is delicious, then say it. If you think you look great today, then say it, right? But we have this thing called, and it's a psychological term. It's called the overestimation bias. What that means is, what that means is we have a tendency to overestimate what we do and underestimate what our spouses do, right? And so, especially when it comes to doing the dishes, we're like, man, we're always doing the dishes. Well, you only see you doing the dishes. You maybe don't necessarily see her doing the dishes when you're away at work or whatever. And so it's really important to appreciate her, whether it's, hey, thank you so much for this meal. Maybe the kids didn't appreciate it, but I sure do. This is delicious. This is my favorite or whatever. Thank you so much for fill in the blank. So appreciation is huge, because they do a lot, man. It's massive. The acknowledgement, very similar to the idea of appreciation, but literally acknowledging the things that she does, right? As a mom, as a wife. Hey, thank you so much for taking the kids out for a walk, or thank you so much for whatever she did. I think is massive. And because they do so much, and I would say this has been a big understanding of mine recently as well, especially in my situation. My wife carries a huge mental load, right? So we pack up for vacation. She's the one packing the kids' snacks. She's packing the, all the bottles and all the toys and all the, and I'm like, hey, where are we going? What's the GPS? I'm driving, whatever. It's a low mental load. Like I'm execution mode only. And so acknowledging all the hard work that she puts in, acknowledging the mental load that she carries, the appointments, the, whatever, right? And then affection is huge because, and I'm sure you're aware of the concept of love languages, but in the sense of a love languages, a lot of guys have this love language of physical touch. And so we want to, we want to touch, we crave that because we want to have sex, right? But that's when I talk about affection, I'm talking about non-sexual touch. I'm talking about affection without strings. It's rubbing her back, when she's had a hard day. It's, kissing her on the cheek when she's doing something around the house, or holding her hand during the movie, or, whatever the case is. This is something that I'm still working on because actually physical touch is not one of my strengths, but it is hers. Mm-hmm. But the problem is so many men touch and they're affectionate with an expectation of return. Mm. And the moment you have an expectation of return, it becomes a contractual relationship. Right. I do this for you. Now, therefore, you must do this for me. And that's not actually love. Love is generous. Love is giving. Love is not self-seeking, right? And so for us to be able to give affection without expectation of return is massive for our partners. So appreciation, acknowledgement, and affection, that's all under feeling seen, right? Which is a huge part, because don't forget that your wife is not just a mom. She's your bride, right? She was your bride before she was a mom.
Yeah.
And our brides, when they become moms, they feel like a mom. They got the dried up puke on the sweater. They got crumbs. They got, whatever, because they're exhausted. They haven't showered in a couple days. But she was a bride before she was the mom, and she needs to feel like a bride from time to time. So when you do these things, you remind her of her femininity. You remind her of the fact that she is your wife and she's a woman to be cherished and to be craved. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember hearing a story of another fellow Canadian, Dr. Jordan Peterson,
Yeah.
when he was talking about, let's say you and your wife go out on a date and she gets really dressed up, looks beautiful, and you don't say shit. You don't acknowledge it. You don't appreciate it. And then maybe that happens like another time a month later. She gets dressed up, looks beautiful. You don't acknowledge it. And then 3 months later, a year later, you're like, hey, how come you never fucking get dressed up anymore? Are you kidding me? Because you never once acknowledged the fact that that was something that you appreciated, that you acknowledged, anything like that, what you're saying. And then, 6 years down the line, you're wondering why your wife never showers, puts on makeup, or puts nice clothes on for you, because for 6 straight years, you never acknowledged it. You only acknowledged it when maybe you were trying to court her and trying to oppress her, and then you got married and it all went down the tube. But if you want to, last forever, it seems like Dr. Jordan Peterson and his wife still have sex all the time. It's just, that's how he talks about it, but like, great, like that's awesome. But maybe he's doing the things that he preaches and talks about. I would assume that he does. And that's something that's really quite important to me. So I always need that reminder, like when my wife makes dinner, like, thank you for dinner. I love this meal. This is a great meal. Thank you. I appreciate it. She makes all the meals. It's like, I should appreciate it, or else I wouldn't fucking be fed, and I don't know what I would do. So it's just very, very, very important. It's like the same thing in the sports world, because I'm a coach, and I'm like, if I want some of my players to do certain things the right way and they do it, and I never acknowledge them for it, what are they going to feel like? They're going to be like, well, coach, in the head there, I did the right thing, but like no one ever said anything. But now I see it, I reward it, I praise it. Good job. Now they're going to keep doing it over and over and over and over again. Obviously, these things are, harder to actually do than just talk about tactically. But if you don't talk about them, and aren't aware of them, then there's no way you can actually do them because you don't even know that they exist. So I think that's also an important note.
Absolutely. It's about being reminded by it, reminded of it and having it in your face all the time. And that's what's so critical. And I think, it's interesting because we talk a lot about the wives' basic needs. But then there's the man has two basic needs. It's to feel respected and to feel competent. Okay. So if I were to ask a room of 1,000 guys, I've done this lots of times. I've asked rooms of guys and I said, what would you rather hear from your wife? I love you or I respect you? 90% of the room will put up their hand they'd rather hear, I respect you. There's something in us as men that we crave to feel respected. We desire it. There's nothing for many men. Again, this is a generalization, but we're talking about majority here. But so many men would rather hear, you're such a hard worker. Thank you so much for how you provide for us. I respect you as a leader, as an athlete, as a father, as a whatever. And you're so good at what you do. I believe in you. Some of those, that verbiage that really resonates with us far more than I love you, I cherish you, because that's more kind of feminine language, right? But here's the problem is we stop seeing, hearing, and making our spouses feel safe in whatever different way. And then our wife, she loses respect for us. Because we're not meeting the needs, because we made promises that we couldn't keep. We got married and we said, we're going to give you the world, and we stopped after 6 months. And so she loses respect. Then we lose our biggest need from being met. Now we're not respected, and we start to feel incompetent as a husband and as a father. And so what do? We withdraw even more, and we don't hear her, we don't see her, we don't make her feel protected because we don't want to. Right? And then what happens? She begins to disrespect us even more. And this is what we call the crazy cycle, right? And so this is how marriages deteriorate over time, right? And when I learned about that, you think about it, and if your listeners listen now, you can even push pause for a moment and think back over the course of your marriage. And I guarantee you, if you're a guy, 90% of the time that you've been really pissed off or frustrated, it was because you felt disrespected or your wife or someone made you feel incompetent. If you're a woman and you're listening, think back to, the times that you were hurt the most. It's probably because you didn't feel heard, you didn't feel seen, or you didn't feel safe, right? And so if we can start to take steps toward one another and have that conversation with the wife, says, how can I respect you as my husband, as the father of our children? How can I make you feel competent in what you do? And then having that conversation with your wife, reciprocating that and saying, how can I make you feel more heard? How can I make you feel more safe? How can I make you feel more seen? And if you can both start to act out of that, man, your marriage can turn around so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, like when I feel useful,
Yes.
I'll fucking do anything. And when my wife feels that she knows that, like the I believe in you one for me is like I'll do anything. I don't give a fuck. I'll work 72 hours straight. If you say you believe in me and this is the thing that you're standing behind and I feel useful about it, I'm willing to go to the ends of the earth. And that's what I'm doing, trying to, build my own business as you're doing, and so when I feel useful doing the thing, and when my wife recognizes that, she sees the joy, that me growing in competency and all those sorts of things, and she just has every once in a while says, "Dude, Aaron, I believe in what you're doing and what you're trying to do for our family," and that's like, it's all I need. I can go on for another 6 months.
That's
I'm
all
good.
you need. Yeah,
Right?
we're pretty
And
simple that way.
it's so interesting, and it's like thinking about that too, like. Of course I want her to say I love you, and we say that like all the time, but like there are a little bit things that hit a little bit deeper, and that's a very interesting point that you say, because I can recognize that with my own psyche.
It turns something on inside of us, right? Because and it really resonates with our masculine essence, because like I talked about, we're driven by mission, by excellence, by accomplishments, by all those different things. And so when our wife encourages us, that's the word encourage means to inspire courage, right? It means to instill courage into someone. to say, you can do this, I believe in you. That helps with our mission and our desire to build, to fix, to accomplish. And so it really meets a really core need of ours, and it's powerful. And so many couples don't necessarily understand that one dynamic. And that one thing alone is what I would say is like a foundational thing, but we get that wrong so often, right? And so as we try to do these like big grand gestures, I'm going to blow a bunch of money on some big trip, or I'm going to do this thing, or I'm going to buy you some extravagant gift, we're just wrapping Band-Aids on things. We're not fixing the foundation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
where could a guy start? Maybe he's married or not, but he wants to earn the respect of a woman. What are some of these, foundational skills that he needs to maybe develop in terms of managing his emotions, like you talked about, or building his body, or having, money prospects, or whatever the case may be?
Well, yeah, I would say, first of all, it really starts with emotional maturity, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing. If we know at the end of the day that what our partners desire most is to be connected with emotionally, like, well, let's just push pause for a second, Aaron, because there's a crazy statistic that I'll share with you. 7 out of 10 divorces in the United States today are initiated by women. 70% of them.
Wow.
And then in situations where the wife is educated and a higher earner, and that number jumps to 90% of divorces are initiated by women. That should be a red flag, all right? Now, of that 70%, 80% of the reasons why women file for divorce is because they feel disconnected from their partner emotionally, not physically, not, in any other way. They feel like they're married to a robot, right? And so what's the first thing we need to understand is how to connect on a deeper level. And before I forget, I want to give your listeners a gift at the end of the show, just to help them with this, because this is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the biggest area that we can that we need to grow in. And I'm not saying poo-poo on you. I'm saying us as men in general. Me too, us all. But emotionally is huge. And I think the second thing that really, what happens for men and why they lose the respect of their partners is, at the end of the day, is they don't follow through with promises, right? And so let's unpack that for a moment. When people ask me, and I coach my clients in this all the time, because they come to me and they're insecure in their marriage. They might be super confident in business, right? But they're lacking self-confidence as a husband and as a father. Now, why do we lose self-confidence? Now, Aaron, let's say this. Say me and you, I say to you, hey, Aaron, I'm going to meet you every Tuesday night. We're going to grab a beer at the local pub. And then the first Tuesday night, I show up at 7:30, but the second one, I show up at 8:30. You're like, what's going on? And then the third one, I show up at 9. And the fourth one, I don't show up at all. Within a month, you're going to be like, I don't have confidence in this guy that he's going to follow through, because he hasn't been doing the things he said he would do. But here's what happens. When we talk about self-confidence, we do this all the time with ourselves. We make promises to ourselves and we don't keep them, right? We say, I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to train. Or we say, I'm going to come home from work and I'm going to show up for my kids and I'm going to put my phone away, and we don't do it. And we think that nobody knows because we didn't tell anybody about this promise we made. But we know, subconsciously you know. And so what happens? Then the mind starts saying to you things like, why would anyone else trust you if you can't even trust yourself that you're going to follow through? So what happens is our self-confidence, our rapport with ourselves erodes, and we don't believe in ourselves. We stop showing up for our partners like we know we should because we're lacking self-confidence and respect. And so what happens is they lose respect for us because we said we would do this, that we would show up, that we would love you, that we would take care of you, that we would, whatever. And we keep breaking promises. And so the lack of emotional connection and then the lack of follow through on top of that is massive, because you can maybe feel a little bit disconnected emotionally, but if you're a man of your word and you are trustworthy and you're, all that stuff, then she can almost kind of get around it a little bit. Or if you're super in touch with her emotionally and you're connected on a deep level and you lack follow through a little bit, there's grace for that because she feels so seen and heard by you. But if you lack both, there is a lack of respect and a lack of love in your relationship. And that's really what causes things to deteriorate. And so what I would say, man, is connect with her emotionally, put all your time and energy. Like, I don't care if you got to build a strategy around it, because that's the way that's the way we're wired, right? Make it a mission. Build whatever you're gonna need to do, and we can talk about how to do that. But and then also follow through. When you make a promise, you better keep it. When you say you're gonna be home from work at 6 o'clock or 5:30, be home at 5:30, because every time you don't, you're eroding that confidence she has in you as a husband. And then following that erosion of confidence is going to be an erosion of respect, right? When you say you're going to put your phone away and you're going to and take care of the kids, you better show up and do that, right? And I know I'm coming down hard on the guys, but at the end of the day, we need to realize, because like I shared with you, the statistics are sobering. It tells us that we need to put in some work, as women do too. But I think it's so important for us as men to understand some of these areas that we struggle, right?
Yeah, we can take ownership. We can take ownership and full responsibility for our lives. Not to bring up Dr. Jordan Peterson again, but he says, like, if every single woman in the world finds you unattractive, it's not the women's fault, right? It's your fault. And it's the same idea here. If all of your relationships don't work or your marriages are not working, yes, of course, I'm sure the women have something to do with it. Sure, fine. But we also play a part in our own lives, and we have something to do with it. Again, that's such a valuable point about keeping our promises to ourselves. Like in the sports world, we talk about confidence being intense trust in oneself. And that's sort of exactly what you displayed there. If I say I'm going to do something, I fucking do it. And if I've done that for so many hours, so many years, and then the one time I don't, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy fix right there. But if I'm a man who never does that, and then I'm not someone who follows through, I can't keep my promises, then how can I be someone who's there when I need you, or for the kids, or for this or for that, or when you lose your job and something happens? Like, you just, all these other scenarios come into play when you can't follow through on these little details, which are not so little, which become sort of your whole life. And I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, another way that this works is in the context of relational currency. You
Mm,
know, a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs and work in business, so the numbers make sense to them, money makes sense to them. So I say, you're in a situation right now where you're not in the green, you're in the red, you're in debt, like a significant amount of debt. Because you've not followed through, because you've not showed up, and so what happens is that's what happens. So every new broken promise feels that much more painful, right? So what do we need to do? We need to start keeping those promises. We need to show up so that we can get up to break even, so that we're like net zero, and then we can start making deposits into the marriage, making deposits into the relationship, into the family, to get a healthy balance, to build up a nest egg. Because you know what? Shit's going to hit the fan, and maybe you will break a promise, or maybe something goes sideways and you got to work on the business for a season, and you're going to have to make some withdrawals. But if you're in a deposit and you got a nest egg built up because you've been diligent, then you can afford to do that if you need to, because your wife trusts your word, she trusts your heart. But if you've done nothing but withdraw, then the slightest thing becomes an emergency.
mm,
It's like, Dave Ramsey says all the time, having an emergency fund turns a crisis into an inconvenience, right? So if you got money in the bank and your furnace blows, that would have been a crisis if you were broke. But right now it's just an inconvenience. That's kind of what I'm talking about. But if your marriage is on the rocks and you're just in so much relational debt when it comes to currency, and then you do something stupid again, that could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. That could be making you the statistic of 7 out of 10 divorces being initiated by your wife, that kind of stuff. So that's why it's so important for us to be asking that question. What does it look like to make a deposit into this relationship? And you can even, I mean, if your wife is a numbers person, you can ask her that. Where are we at, in our love bank? Are you feel like we're in the plus, or do you feel like we're in the negative? And if so, what does it look like for us to really pour into our marriage? What does it look like for me to make some deposits so that you feel like you're in a better place with how we stand in our relational currency? And this concept applies everywhere.
mhm.
Colleagues, business owners, partners, our kids, you name it, right? But it's a pretty practical way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Let's jump into some emotions a little bit more and dive deeper into that. Like, do you think it's part culture that men are accustomed to just sort of pushing their emotions away, trying to be stoic about everything. How do we make that switch, or maybe what does that come from, or what have you learned about all that?
Yeah, no, such a good question. And I would say if you're listening to this and you feel like you feel like you clam up when you don't, when you're being pressed about how you feel and you don't know how to talk about how you feel, I would say you are absolutely normal and you are part of the vast majority. There's actually a psychological term around this. It's called normative male alexithymia, which is a bit of a mouthful. But if you break, I was actually just writing this because I'm building a new course around it. But if you break down the word alexithymia, it actually, if you derive the words from the Greek, it actually means like arrest words or like without words. And so normative, meaning it's normal, male, us as men, to be without words, right? So when it comes to our ability to talk about how we feel and express ourselves, we actually clam up. We actually don't have the words to say. And that's very normal and part of the male expression. Now that we've acknowledged that this is normal, let's back up a few generations and this will make some sense. So has anyone ever heard of World War II or World War I? You know, a lot of these men came home from the war with extreme trauma, extreme PTSD. They didn't have therapists. They didn't have wellness plans to be able to get therapy. They had the bottle, they had the Legion, whatever, but they stuffed it down. They drank their problems away, and God blessed them, and we thank them for their sacrifice. But they didn't have the tools to process what they went through. And so those men raised boys into men and taught them, hey, being a man, we stuff it, man. Deal with it. Real men don't cry, right? Figure it out. And so those men raised men. So we're like, dude, we're just like 2 generations removed from extreme PTSD and trauma and stuffing our emotions. So that's number one. We need to understand our heritage, right? So then 2, you add in the fact that we live in a culture that says men don't talk about their feelings, right? There's a statistic I read a little while ago, a study done that 80% of men in America don't feel confident or comfortable being vulnerable or honest about their emotions, even amongst their best friends.
80%.
Right? Yeah. So even if you did have the words to say, you wouldn't feel comfortable talking about it because no one else does, right? It's like if me and you and a bunch of buddies went out for a beer again, and I showed up this time, and I said, Aaron, my heart is broken for this. I'm struggling so much emotionally right now. You'd be like, how do you approach that, right? It's just kind of awkward for guys. And so obviously, you got to think about how to approach that if you're going to do it with a bunch of guys who are also unaware of how to connect with their emotions. But what I'm saying here is culturally, it's not really accepted. And so we get into this situation where men, because of our wiring, because of our past, because of the culture we live in, this is how we wrestle. And this is why we struggle in marriage and in relationships, right? And so the best thing that I would say, even just things like the Hoffman Institute has a feelings list. It sounds funny, but there's 2 pages back to back, and you can scroll, like literally go through it and be like, okay, it might take you 5 minutes. And you're like, bingo, that one. That's what I feel, right? I have an emoji chart that I use with my clients. I'm like, point to the feeling that you're feeling. Point to the face that you're feeling, which sounds ridiculous, but it is so helpful because, again, remember, normative male alexithymia. We don't have the words and we clam up. So that's a huge part, man, is like understanding, number one, you're normal. You're a product of your environment, but we need to take ownership because now, unlike our grandparents and our great-grandparents, we do have tools and resources that we can use, right? And so get around other men, hire a coach, get around a community of guys that can help you process, right? So I have something called the Dad Nation Coalition, which is a community of men who are on the exact same journey, who want to level up in their marriage, in their fitness, in their mindset. When I say a mindset, I'm talking about emotions, where we can get real and honest and open and really kind of normalize how we're feeling because again, we're lone wolves, right? But the lone wolf dies alone. right? The strong wolf builds a pack. And so you have to fight that internal wiring to be a lone ranger, to be a lone wolf, and push yourself into a community with men that can help you normalize this. Because like we said, we know statistically, we know that this is true, that we all struggle with this. And so what's the best way to get help with it? Well, is to get around other men who can normalize it for you. And then having someone who can actually, like a coach who can collapse the time it takes you to learn this. Because you could be like me, and it could take you a decade to understand this, and almost lose your wife, and I was 60 pounds overweight. I was $100,000 in debt. We're on the verge of divorce. I was medicating with drugs and alcohol. Like my turning point, dude, my life was a mess. And it took me about 7-8 years to kind of figure it out. So I'm like, well, yeah, you could do it my way, the hard way, or you could hire someone and you can do it in 6 months. You understand what I mean? So my thing is like, get around a community of men and bring in someone who can help you with this. Because it's so hard to do it on your own because you're fighting against a system that wasn't designed for success in that area, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean the team environment is such a beautiful thing. That was one of my like biggest fears when I stopped playing baseball. It's like, man, I'm not gonna be around my guys anymore. They're not gonna be across the street or down the hall. Like, how are we getting like, relationships develop over time, and thank God we're all still very close. And they were groomsmen in my wedding, just because we still have that team environment. But our relationships are different now. The conversations we have are different now. We're talking about mortgages and stocks and our relationship and babies and things of that nature. But we built such a close knit bond that it feels okay to talk about things that are very serious. And you only get that in a men's group sort of team environment where you do things that are hard and you talk about things that are hard and you get to the sort of the base layer of it all. And you have someone who's there to guide you, who's there to sort of put the pieces back together and patch these little things and give you tactical advice. And like, man, yeah, there's nothing more powerful than a group of dudes coming together and doing stuff together and then going out into the world and then expressing that best version of themselves in wherever sort of domain they live in. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I would add to that, because and I'm not slamming therapy. I think therapy can be amazing. There are a lot of great men who are therapists who are understanding some of the flaws in the system, but like 90% of the guys that I coach have already tried therapy, and it just didn't work for them because, again, it's built traditionally. It's kind of built on a bit more of a feminine model, but men, we need to get out of our heads into our hands. We got to be tactile. We have to have something we can do, a workout, whatever. So we're just wired differently. And so that's why it's so important to understand how being around like-minded men who understand you and how you're wired and can help you with that, and also help celebrate your successes and stand with you in your losses, and through it all, man. I mean, it's massive. And so, like I said, there's a time and a place for therapy for sure, but I can't understate the importance of just getting around other like-minded men, because there's something that channels within you, because it's, again, the masculine nature of what we do. We celebrate, we get each other, versus, when you think about when you're married, you're only going to understand your wife to a certain extent, and she's only going to understand you to a certain extent. And that's okay. And that's actually a part of marriage. And there are certain things that she won't understand that you're going to have to take to other men. And that's normal and that's healthy. Mm-hmm. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think therapy is really good at getting you from like a negative back to baseline.
Yes.
But I think then coaching, or whatever you want to call it, is really good at getting you from baseline to your true, powerful, unbelievable capabilities. And therapy, it is geared towards sort of the feminine aspect. I guess, like you said, there are some really, really, really good male therapists, but they're very few and far between. And so you have to just be very selective about who you talk to and how they approach the situation. But one more thing to ask you about that. So you talked about the previous history, about sort of how we got to this point. Do you think because of that previous history, maybe we've overcorrected that and potentially feminized modern masculinity?
Absolutely.
Cool.
I think this is part of the reason we're in a bit of a mess as we are, is because you can't say the word masculinity without getting canceled today.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is exactly why I started the mission of the Dad Nation, because we're helping reclaim masculinity. We're helping normalize the word again. And I would say, so many people talk about I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here, but
Let's go.
so so many people talk about this word toxic masculinity, right? And I would say I want us to just replace the word toxic with immature. Because if you take every trait of toxic masculinity and you look at it, it's actually a case of immaturity. It's little boys who are trying to be men, who are demanding their way, who are, unrealistic, who are being overly assertive, who don't understand, what it means to protect, to provide, to preside, to the things that we're talking about, right? And so when I say modern masculinity, I think it's not the model from the 50s and the 40s. I think we got things to learn. It's not from what we're doing today either, because you're right. We've lost touch of some of the things that make us men. It is a spectrum. It is somewhere in the middle of you being what I love the phrase being easy to love and hard to kill. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about, masculinity. Obviously, his book, The 12 Rules for Life, is incredible. But can you be confident? Can you be focused? Can you be assertive? Can you be driven, and be dangerous, for the right things, but also be connected with your emotions and to hold space for those you love and to be able to sit in attention and have the humility and the empathy to be able to really channel what's going on the inside and be able to speak about it confidently, about being able to feel those things confidently and hear your wife's laments or complaints without feeling attacked. Have the confidence to be able to sit in that tension, right? And I think modern masculinity is just a really nice combination of both. That's how I would see it. And I, a couple statistics I want to share with you and your listeners, because I think a lot of parts of society would say that men don't matter, but I want to share some things with you. Like 1 in 4 kids today in America will grow up without a father in the home, right? And that's a big problem because these numbers will shake you. So 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. 90% of homeless and runaway children come from fatherless homes. 85% of kids with behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. And this last statistic, which is crazy, 71% of high school dropouts also come from fatherless homes. And so what's the truth here amidst a culture that is very confused? Our children need us. This world needs men. It needs masculinity. Our spouses need us. What you do matters. And we also need each other. And so we're lonelier than ever. We're more medicated than ever. We know that today in America, the average man spends over 2,000 hours per year in front of a screen, drowning and distracting himself from his life. And that's like, 85 days a year or something like that? I mean, it's outrageous. So we got to understand that we've never been more needed, but we've never been more lonely, depressed, tired, and medicated. So this is the time to rise up. It's never been easier to be a man today because the bar is so low.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's exactly why I started this movement, man, to help restore masculinity, to restore the man, the husband, and the father in the home. It's massive.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Really beautiful. I heard this guy named John Lovell. He put it masculinity as the warrior poet, and I found that to be perfect. We've talked about the warrior side. Everyone knows the warrior side, but the poet side, like me, for example, learning how to express my love through vows to my wife. That's the poet side. If I don't get in touch with that, I can't really express beauty to my wife that I want to spend the rest of my life to her if I'm not in touch with that poet side. And so I think warrior poet is a really good way to frame masculinity. Just and how you expressed it was quite beautiful. But Mitchell, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that maybe I failed to ask you that you want to just touch on here before we wrap up?
No, I think we hit it all. I try my best to take some time to just encourage, the men listening on whatever show, whatever podcast, whatever platform I'm on, because I think, we need it. Life is tough, and it can be hard to balance, to sit in that balance and to do all these things and you feel the pressure. There's a significant weight that, I talked about the mental load that our wives carry of, the kids and all those different things, but we also carry a mental load as well, which is significant, and it's so important to acknowledge that. But I would just say, man, if you're listening to this today, know you're not alone, right? Know what you do matters. You're normal. You're not broken. You just maybe need some new tools and some skills, and we can help you retool and reskill and help you level up, because you can have it all. I think a lot of people would say, well, you can't have the career and be a good dad. You can't make the money and be at your, dinner every night or the kids' soccer game. Yeah, you can. It's just a matter of understanding, having the right systems in your life, right, to be able to accomplish all those different things. So that would just be my encouragement to your listeners, man.
Excellent. And where's the best place to go if they want to just check out your pod, your coaching, the 50 questions thing that you mentioned? Where's the best
Yeah.
spot?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. First of all, man, if you're listening to this and any of this has resonated with you, if you feel like you maybe your wife feels more like a roommate than a soulmate, you know, maybe your date nights feel like board meetings, I would say download this gift. It's called the Connection Code. It's my free gift to you, and it's 50 questions to spark the fun and get the fire back in your relationship. And they're amazing. Whether you go out on a date night or you put the kids down, pour up a glass of wine, take 2 or 3 questions off this list each time, and it's going to blow her mind. I get wives message me all the time being like, these questions changed. Like, who is this man that you gave these questions to? So it's amazing. And it's totally free, and you will love it. So do that. But then also, you can just check out the Dad Nation podcast. I make it real simple, man. I do 3 things. I have 3 C's, all right? I got the content, which is the Dad Nation podcast. The courses, which is called the High Performance Husband, something I'm working on right now, which is everything I teach my one-to-one clients in an online program. And then content, courses, and then coaching, which is, the group coaching, which I mentioned, the Dad Nation Coalition. But for the right guy too, I can also do one-to-one coaching as well. It's just kind of a bit of a back pocket offer. But yeah, man, that's what I do. And honestly, if you just Google, without sounding vain, if you just Google Dad Nation, you'll find me.
Yeah. Well, Mitchell, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you for what you're doing. And we need more people like you in the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It's been a blast, brother. I love this conversation, and looking forward to staying in touch, brother.
Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.